The last metal type, which we didn't cover yet, which is also quite fun to create, is the look of brushed metal. And again, before we try to do anything in Blender, let's take a look at reference images we can find. So we can find examples that visually tell us how brushed metal looks and what we have to do in Blender. So brushed metal, particularly when we have a linear brush or a circular brush, has the characteristic of first, well, a brush surface, brushed metal, and then the highlights are stretched. And not only stretched, they run actually perpendicular to the brush direction. So this is brushed horizontal, the highlight is vertical. On circular surfaces, those brushed details look really, really nice. But also on hardware, for example, a faucet, when we brush along a particular direction, either following the pipe or brushing around the pipe, we can then stretch the highlight. So how does actually, or why do we see a stretched highlight? Mother Nature actually has the perfect visual example to explain this. Let's Google moon water reflection. And let's see, from all those images, this actually has waves in it which are a little bit too big. Let's select this image here. So you can see there's the moon, and the reflection is really, really long. Oh, this is here even better. There. So we see actually the reflection on the water of the moon always on top of a wave. And the waves are actually kind of like going horizontal, if you want to say it this way. And then the highlight is stretched perpendicular towards it. Now, this is the way how the moon actually would look from this standpoint, meaning we're kind of like at ground level. If we would be in a plane and look down onto the water and not kind of like along the water, we would see, technically speaking, a round dot. Okay, so but anyway, this actually very well shows you this phenomenon again one more time. So when we think about the metal, when I brush left and right, I'm creating grooves, like I'm creating waves. And then the highlight will be stretched over it. Okay, so with that taken care of, let's go to Blender. One statement up front, Eevee is actually not able to that well render anisotropic reflections. It works actually not as good. This is also a kind of tricky material. Cycles in this case works significantly better, as it should. So we will start our setup in Eevee, and then the final rendering we do in Cycles. Okay. So before we continue, this lag I will call, rename it into concept. Then Shift-T and escape. And I will call this one baked. And I will explain that in a second, why we did this there. Okay, so let's give this a new material. Brushed metal. There we are. Can zoom in a little bit, maybe move this up a tick there. And then this goes down, metallic goes up, very good. Roughness maybe 0.4. So there you see, there's actually our highlight. And you see when we increase the reflectivity, the the highlight actually grows. And here's the slider anisotropic. So we need to have first a metallic slide reflection, then the roughness has to be kind of like be there, a little bit bigger, more rough, and then we slide this one, and we don't really see much there. Okay, so that's the reason why when we go to cycles, you see how the highlight goes fully along. How cool is that? So we go and set this to 0. You see the highlight is only there. 0.25, 0.5, and then there you start noticing how the highlight starts being stretched. Now, right now the highlight actually goes this direction. We could rotate it. Here's a rotate tool that actually goes 0 to 1. 0.25 is actually 90 degrees. Yeah. And then 0.5 is 180, 0.75, 270 in 1, and then we are back to it. So you see now actually with 0.25 how different the highlight is, because the highlight is actually, technically speaking, running this way, like goes around it, and when we set this to 0, it goes along it. Good. So I also mentioned before the roughness has to be high. If we set this to 0, we don't really see much. The surface is clean. If we increase this a little bit, we can actually see here the highlight being stretched already. Well, when we increase the roughness a little bit more, we really kind of like shoot the highlight across it. This is also an artistic point of view, how strong you want this effect to be visible. Okay, very good. So this is kind of like a very quick way how to create the brushed look. But the texture is missing and the bump mapping is missing. So we'll do the following. First, I turned off rendering, Shift A, input texture coordinates. Okay, then Shift A texture, we could use Moose Graph and object, and there, very good. 500. I will go back actually to Eevee for the moment. Turn this off so I can see this graphical look. There we are. And you see actually it nicely follows along it. Pretty cool. Yeah. Then Shift A, we want to compress this. And mapping here in between. And now we need to figure out which slider it is. This one there. So maybe 10. Okay. And then those here we make smaller. And we can make this even more, so maybe 40. So you see we're actually really packing in a lot of lines. Does this look good so far? Here it does, but what's going on here? This is incorrect. These rings have to follow, because think about, we take sandpaper and we just rub it kind of like around it. So that's the reason why we made a copy and called this lag baked, because we have everything in this model is actually just this polygon mesh, which we then bevel. So now we give it the rounding, then we skin it to give it the thickness, and then we bevel it one more time. So step number 1, we want to, and here let me turn all this stuff off so you see kind of like what we do. I want this effect to be permanent. And then also my skin, that one I want to be permanent. Very good. Now I can go to the bottom, face select this bottom and this bottom, X and delete face, because now when I turn on the bevel modifier, you see it's nice and round. And the bottom is actually straight. So I needed to apply at least the first two modifiers. Again, also the reason why I keep this one as a copy is when we want to change the leg, this is very easy to change. This one now, because we baked it, has more geometry. This is going to be more work. Okay, very good. So the reason why we created this geometry is because we have to unwrap it. We need to use UV coordinates for this. I will set all this for the moment. No, actually, maybe let's keep this. Let's see if this actually will work. So let's see. Rendered. Do we see anything? Not yet. Let's connect this and see. Yeah. Something does not work. And that is actually, we created the geometry and we told it to use the UV unwrapping. We didn't unwrap it yet. So let's go to UV editor, edit mode, select everything, and and unwrap, and then we get kind of like this craziness. So little trick. We go to edge select this inner edge because this is inside the object. Not inside the object. This is under the chair, so facing the inside. And when we have a seam, that seam at least we can hide. So mark seam. There we are. U unwrap. Whoa, look at that. We have a line. See? Basically, it unwrapped the whole thing into a flat sheet. So now with this UV unwrapping in there, let's see how this looks. Much better. And we actually can see the directions are wrong. So let's go to one and see which one is it. We have to make bigger or we have to make smaller. So you can see this when I make this one smaller, there it seems to stretch along it. So I have to go the opposite. I have to make this bigger. There, okay, now I'm compacting it more. This one I keep at 1, it doesn't really work. So let's say this is 10, and then with this one, here I have to make this one smaller, so I'm stretching the texture. I hope you noticed what we did. So we had a very basic UV texture, and then along direction we compressed it, and then along the other direction we stretched it, and that then generates this look of a brushed surface. This is not specific how to use the Moosh graph. This more or less actually works with every type of texture anyway. So if I put this in and 500 there, yep, there it is too. This is actually nice and great. Maybe we will use this one instead. Yep, there we are. And when we go back to here to this, and there you see this texture. Okay, very good. So we did the UV unwrapping. Let's turn this off for the moment. For few extra reasons. So when we go to cycles and go to render and then turn metallic on. Okay, now so this is all set. And now when I use this distance and put this, for example, in there, I can colorize actually the metal a little bit if I want to. That's a question. Or this is the reason why we created this pattern. I could go to a vector bump 0.001 distance into height. There, you see now it roughens this up more. This is way too big, so maybe 20. Then this is too coarse. This is too fine. Whoops. 0.0001. And there you can see how, because of this bump mapping, the highlight gets a really nice structure. Yeah, and essentially that is really what anisotropic reflection or brushed metal is about. Okay, now there are more settings we can do here to perfect this. Again, this is more at an introduction level, so you understand kind of like the mechanics of what we do. The nice thing about computer graphics is everything that I showed you, for example, of the unwrapping, how we created textures, compacted and stretched it, used reflectivity, roughness, and the anisotropic. That is actually kind of like a standard process. Not necessarily unique only to Blender. It's just the way how it's done. Like we all have different cars, but we drive the same streets. Okay, very good. Then last thing left, click this. Now when we just go back to Eevee, for example, let it render. Now you see that the bump mapping we can see, but the stretching simply isn't there. So if you have to do this type of a metal, unfortunately, then Eevee is not the best case. There aren't really that many situations where you need to brush metal, unlike you have to work with brush metal, like faucets, for a sink, shower, or the brushed metal surface of elevator doors. So it's not that we come across this metal that often. Or pots and pans. Okay, very good.